Dinghai Fusheng Records. Chapter 61. Gigantic Jiao. Chen Xing, wait, how come there's a dragon? Who are you? You're the Dongj Bank's proprietress, why are you here? Wen Zhe, right. I'm the boss of Dongj Bank. No This dragon, Fujun. Feng Yunjun, what Fujun? Don't shout Wen Zhe walked to the azure jiao and facing it, she murmured, I remembered. Shi Haidaran asked me to run this place, use the Luohun bell to collect people's earth huns, refine Fujun's corpse, wait for Fujian to cross over the Yangtze River, release Fujun after that, and kill the emperor by working together with him. Not long ago, a group of exorcists suddenly came. Exorcists? It's you guys. Chen Xing was stunned. Right. I'm an exorcist. Feng Dage. We're here to get rid of the Yao. Get her. At once, Wen Zhe shouted and activated the Luohun bell. Feng Yunjun also remembered, and he readied Sen Luo Wangxiang. As he was about to rush forwards, with a rumble, the sea of flowers erupted once again, there were the Lihun pollens as far as the eye could see. Chen Xing, achoo. Feng Yunjun, ha, hachi. Wen Zhe, chi. Xiao Shan, chu. Everyone. Wen Zhe was baffled. She looked at the Luohun bell in her hand and thought out loud, what was I going to do with this thing? Chen Xing, yi? Where is this? Xiao Shan. Feng Yunjun, Wen Zhe? Why are you here? Come here. There is a monster behind you. Panicking, Wen Zhe immediately said, this is my Fujun. In order to kill an evil Jiao, Fujun's whole body was corroded by the serpent's venom, and it made him look like this. Don't kill him. Chen Xing, oh? Why? Wait, we're here to get rid of the Yao? Why do I remember going down a well? Where's Shi Haidaran? Wen Zhe's eyes were full of fear. Daran! Where are you? Feng Yunjun shouted in anger, Shi Hai! You killed my big brother. I'm gonna take your life. In an instant, all of them remembered. Wen Zhe changed her attitude and shouted, go die. Feng Yunjun readied the Sen Luo saber again. As Sen Luo Wangxiang was unleashed, the sea of Lihun flowers shone in all directions, and the third wave of pollen flew out. Chen Xing, achoo. Feng Yunjun, hachoo. Wen Zhe, achi. Xiao Shan, chi. Everyone. Chen Xing. Chen Xing only felt his head spinning. He looked around at the unfamiliar surroundings. The next moment, Xiang Shu rushed out from behind the stone pillar with much struggle and shouted, listen to me. Don't breathe. Watch out for the pollen. Get the magical instrument in her hand. Feng Yunjun, put your saber away. After shouting this, Xiang Shu lost all his strength. With great effort, he knelt on one knee at the edge of the magical array, using the broadsword as his support. Feng Yunjun heard what he said, he put the Sen Luo saber away and went ahead barehanded. Chen Xing said, what's this for? Feng Yunjun, I don't know, I just listened to him. Wen Zhe said in a fury, you guys are thieves. Why do you want to seize my magical artifact? Magical artifact, the Luohun bell. Right. Xiao Shan howled, rushed forwards, then raised his claw. Too late to dodge, Wen Zhe's wrist was struck by that claw. The Luohun bell flew out, Chen Xing neatly used a grappling hook to fish out the Luohun bell, pulling it into his hand and firmly grasping it. Feng Yunjun pounced and held Wen Zhe down, holding his dagger against her neck. Wen Zhe kept struggling and angrily shouted, let me go. Chen Xing, now what? We come here to snatch this magical artifact? Isn't this the Luohun bell? I remembered. Yes, yes, yes. Hand it over. Xiang Shu, quick. Purify the magical artifact. Why are you just standing there? Chen Xing took a few steps back. Holding the Luohun bell, he began to purify this magical artifact with the heart lamp's power. In an instant, the heart lamp shone brilliantly along the meridians in his hands, and swiftly, it was injected into the Luohun bell. It's good you weren't affected by the Lihun flower. Chen Xing smiled and said towards Xiang Shu. Do it. Feng Yunjun and Xiang Shu shouted at the same time. Chen Xing mobilized his mana, and the resentment inside the Luohun bell burst out all of the sudden. With a loud rumble, the bell turned bright with radiance. Gather! Chen Xing stepped back, his right hand shaking the bell. Dong! The luminous butterflies that filled the whole place, reminiscent of a cluster of stars, continuously flew and sped into the Luohun bell. What's next? Said Chen Xing. Go up to the surface and release the butterflies. Xiang Shu! Xiang Shu! Xiang Shu dropped to the ground and fell unconscious. The luminous butterflies had all flown away. The dragon binding array lost its source of mana, turned dim, and with a buzz, disappeared completely. You're a drought fiend. Feng Yunjun looked at Wen Zhe's complexion up close, only to see that her eyes gradually turned muddy. He finally realized why this boss always wore a fragrance for no specific reason. She was trying to hide her body's stench. Hee. Ha ha ha. Wen Zhe was held by Feng Yunjun, and her facial features were ferocious. A strange laughter was heard all of the sudden, and soon afterwards, the array lost its effect, and that rotten, gigantic Jiao opened its eyes and raised its head towards Feng Yunjun and Wen Zhe. Feng Dage! Watch your back! Shouted Chen Xing. The Jiao dragon woke up and suddenly marched. Slithering with black resentment in its wake, it swept towards Feng Yunjun. Xiao Shan and Chen Xing rushed forwards together, only to see that Jiao dragon's tail swatted violently on the cave wall and made a loud noise. Feng Yunjun was hit and swatted out. Xiao Shan leapt mid-air, spun his body, and swung Kangsheng Yuli. However, the Jiao dragon sword, sweeping over the pillar supporting the cave at lightning speed, lifted up its claw, and struck against Kangsheng Yuli's shockwaves. The dragon's claw broke, filthy blood bursting from it. Yet, the Jiao dragon's enormous body easily overcame the shock. It moved past the stone pillar and swung its tail to the side, swatting Xiao Shan back to the ground. The shockwaves from Kangsheng Yuli hadn't disappeared yet. It had cut the stone pillar in two, causing the cave to constantly shake and rocks to fall. Xiao Shan shouted as he fell on top of the rubble. He got up with much difficulty, wanting to fight again, but Chen Xing pounced from the side and pulled him away. Feng Yunjun said, "The cave's going to collapse. Let's go. Don't ever think of leaving." Wen Zhe madly shouted in a shrill voice, "This place will become your tomb." Chen Xing, Xiao Shan, and Feng Yunjun rushed towards Xiang Shu's side. "Xiang Shu! Xiang Shu!" Chen Xing called, full of anxiety. Xiang Shu's eyes were tightly shut. Feng Yunjun could only draw his saber and shouted, "No choice, let's do this again." Chen Xing. Can this big guy swallow the Lihun pollen? Chen Xing, I don't know. It's coming. Xiang Shu. Can you move? Get up ah! Chen Xing activated the heart lamp and pressed it on Xiang Shu's chest. The Jiao dragon soared and moved around in the air. The escaped Wen Zhe was already on the dragon's head, and at this moment, she was pulling at the Jiao dragon's horn, getting him to make a dive towards the four people. The dragon dove with a tremendous force of thousands of June, and as the Jiao dragon opened its mouth, green poisonous mist spewed out from inside. It was ready to swallow down the four people. Xiang Shu, who was leaning on the ground, opened his eyes. A sword swept across, and with a clang, the blade turned into a light chakram, making a buzzing sound as it met the Jiao dragon's attack. Under the impact of the tremendous force, resentment burst out. For a split second, on the spot where one man and one dragon clashed, there seemed to be an apparition of the light dragon on Xiang Shu's side, shouting at the azure dragon in a loud voice. Chen Xing only felt his eardrums ringing hard, making him nearly puke out blood. Xiang Shu, however, had already dragged up his long sword in a natural manner, casually pressing one foot on the ground to get up. Leaning into one shoulder, he turned the sword in his hand into a sparkling long rope and let it loose with emotion, shouting, "Get lost!" The rope filled the entire place and at once, it wound around the azure dragon. Wen Zhe's complexion changed, and she yelled, "What is this?" Shulakong! Xiang Shu had bound the azure dragon with the Akala blade that had shifted form into a long rope, but it kept struggling and bumping into the cave ceiling. "The cave's going to collapse!" shouted Feng Tian. Boulders fell down, Xiao Shan shouted as he waved Kangsheng Yuli and chopped down the one that was falling onto them to pieces. Chen Xing said, "To the surface! Don't fight here!" Wen Zhe stopped talking and urged the azure dragon to move. The dragon dragged the Akala blade's light rope with it as it rammed into one side of the cave wall. The trees and buildings on the surface all collapsed alongside it. Immediately afterwards, a cry of the dragon was heard as it soared into the sky. On a moonlit night, in the city of Kuiji, the western wall collapsed with a loud rumble, the whole district went down and sank underground. An azure dragon rose from the ground and hovered in the sky. Xiang Shu carried Chen Xing in his arms as they rushed out to the surface. Xiao Shan immediately followed, leaping out like a shooting arrow towards the rooftop. Feng Tian made several jumps and landed on the main street. 4 people looked up. The azure dragon, circling in the sky under the bright moon, opened its mouth and spewed out a dense, poisonous mist. "Can't wait any more," Wen Zhe said in a cold manner. "No need for an auspicious date, today, I will avenge my Fujun." "Isn't your Fujun that dragon you mount?" Feng Tian, holding Sen Luo Wangxiang in his hands, shouted. "It's not dead ah! Revenge for what? You're okay?" Chen Xing said in disbelief. "But I haven't even released the souls inside the Luohun bell yet." Xiang Shu's brows were furrowed, he had regained all of his strength. He gazed into the horizon, then looked at Chen Xing. "Can you help me deal with that Jiao?" Xiang Shu didn't elaborate further and instead asked him. Chen Xing nodded and said, "Give me some time. Protect me while I'm casting. If this guy goes on a rampage, we won't know how many people will die. Exorcists, assemble!" Xiang Shu shouted. "Protect Chen Xing!" Feng Tian and Xiao Shan came down from the roof, abandoning the Jiao dragon and stood by Chen Xing's side, protecting him. Xiang Shu stood between Chen Xing and the Jiao dragon, holding his broadsword with one hand pointed towards the night sky. Chen Xing recited the incantation in his heart and raised the Luohun bell, hoping that this incantation he had learned under his master could be used. The heart lamp's radiance kept getting brighter. Xiang Shu seemed to sense it, the Akala blade glowed a brilliant light, and one by one, a white, raging flame blossomed on each of the 9 inscriptions on the blade. "Repeal!" Chen Xing's shout reverberated. The next moment, with a dong, the sound of Luohun bell resonated throughout the horizon. Facing the sky, the bell released countless luminous butterflies in an instant. They burst out with a loud rumble and scattered to every part of the city, before flying towards Danyang, Wuzhen, Jiankong, and other places amidst the dark night, reminiscent of a sea of light that moved between heaven and earth. Hundreds of thousands of butterflies, hundreds of thousands of human Huns, splendid and majestic as they flew back to their owners, it became a sight to behold. In the city of Kuiji, many people woke up one after another. The butterflies rested on the foreheads of those affected by the plague and entered them. Each patient would wake up after that, and one after another, they walked out of their house. Exorcists who helped the villains, Wen Zhe, in the sky, said in a stern voice, "I'll get rid of you all today." After activating the Luohun bell, Chen Xing felt a sharp pain in his heart vein. He felt suffocated, just like that day when he purified the Zheng drum. expelling the resentment that had long stained the magical artifact by relying solely on the heart lamp in his yin and yang souls, as far as he was concerned, gravely injured his heart vein. "I'm fine." Chen Xing raised his head and met Xiang Shu's gaze, forcibly swallowing a mouthful of blood. "We have to find a way to get rid of this Jiao," Xiang Shu said. "Leave it to me. You two protect Chen Xing and find a safe place to stay." "What's going on?" Wu Qi woke up because of the noise and hurried over with his subordinates. "What kind of monster is that?" "Dragon." The Jiao dragon ran amok inside Kuiji while spewing out poisonous mist. People along the road fled one after another. Those who were touched by the poisonous mist, even just a little, fell to the ground and died. Chen Xing roared, "Come to me! Wen Zhe! My Fujun once protected countless people of the divine land." Wen Zhe's voice reverberated in the sky, full of resentment and hatred. "Yet, you all treated him as an evil monster. What's the use of this kind of world? Take him away," Xiang Shu told Wu Qi. "Chen Xing, wait! Official! Evacuate the city. Make them leave first." Xiang Shu moved to the roof in a swift motion. Feng Qunjun and Xiao Shan each looked for some higher ground and used it to climb over. The dragon had the advantage of flight, and its fear of Xiang Shu's capability kept it from lowering in altitude. The exorcists couldn't fly, there was no way around it, so they could only resort to shooting arrows into the sky. Wu Qi sent people to evacuate the people first, then took Chen Xing to the platform in the official's mansion. Chen Xing rushed to the railing only to see that Feng Qunjun and Xiao Shan were gone. There was only Xiang Shu on the roof, leaping vertically and chasing after that Jiao dragon. Chen Xing supported himself on the railing, gasping for breath. A scholar by Wu Qi's side asked, "Are you all right?" Chen Xing shook his head and said to Wu Qi, "To be honest, we're exorcists, and the real reason we came to Kuiji this time was to investigate the plague." Exorcists? Everyone was dumbfounded. Wu Qi, however, had heard about exorcists before. He said, "Nowadays there are still exorcists. The Xiang family had been at its peak hundreds of years ago in Kuiji, and their deeds had been spread for many years. The locals, unlike the people from the Central Plains whose historical records were tightly divided by historical periods, should have been less surprised when hearing about exorcists." Chen Xing reluctantly nodded. A general of the Jin army then said, "I'll lead the troops and help them. We'll use grappling hooks to drag the monster down from the sky." The scholar said, "You need to be careful yourself." Chen Xing suddenly remembered that he had seen these two people in the official's mansion before he had entered the well. After they had put on their clothes, I really didn't recognize them until a moment ago. You both." Chen Xing composed himself. He had wanted to ask, "Are you guys lovers?" but then thought that that was wrong. At this time, who would still care about such an unimportant matter? Chen Xing immediately changed his words and said, "Do you have any records about Jiao dragons or gigantic serpents rioting?" The scholar said, "I'll look for it." The scholar was called Zhang Lun, and the general was called Bai Hun. They were the right and left hands of the provincial official Wu Qi. Now, Wu Qi and Chen Xing stood on the platform on the mansion's third floor, giving a clear view of the whole city. "Official," Chen Xing said, "you'd better get out of the city and hide too." Wu Qi said, "This old man is the parental official of Kuiji. People haven't left the city yet, and you're still fighting in this place. How can I just escape alone?" Chen Xing admired Wu Qi's courage and wisdom. When the Jiao had appeared all of the sudden, this local magistrate didn't show the slightest fear of this monster, and instead, he commanded people in a calm manner, setting out an example, rather than just watching the Jiao dragon wreaking havoc in the city. The general called Bai Hun gathered some soldiers then began to pursue the dragon, following Xiang Shu. None in Kuiji. Zhang Lun returned in a hurry and spread out a document, saying, "But I suddenly remembered that several decades ago, during the time of the disaster of Yongjia, many regional records of Ludi were brought to Jiangnan, and some ended up in Kuiji. Chendaran, would you like to see this? It's said that there was Jiao trouble in the Si River, and the exorcist, Xin Yuanping, and his protector, Wen Che put an end to the dragon. Chen Xing remembered in an instant. He had read the memorial written by Wen Che for the exorcist, Xin Yuanping, when he was still with his master. Wen Che, is a girl. It's this lady Wen in front of me. That azure dragon is Xin Yuanping? But Xin Yuanping had obviously died, sacrificing himself to kill the Jiao, so why did he also turn into a Jiao? Chendaran. Zhang Lun probed for more details. End chapter. Dinghai Fusheng Records. Chapter 62. Exhaustion. This is really too much for me to take in, Chen Xing said as he finally collected himself. They were originally on our side. Xiang Shu got up on the city wall, chasing the azure Jiao around the outer periphery of the city as it struggled while flying through the air, spewing black, rotting blood onto the earth below. The sky gradually grew brighter, and a thin sliver of dawn appeared on the horizon, stretching towards the city. What? Xiang Shu lifted his long sword, circling to the top of the turret as he shouted distantly, "Don't use the heart lamp anymore. It's too harmful for you." That's Xin Yuanping. Chen Xing shouted. The azure Jiao is Xin Yuanping. Who's Xin Yuanping? Feng Qianjun was approaching the Jiao when he heard Chen Xing's cry, and he lifted his head to shout back in response. He's an exorcist. Chen Xing stood on the platform on the third floor of the official's manor as he called out to the people down below. Xiang Shu yelled, "How do we get rid of it? Do you have any ideas?" Chen Xing, I don't have any. I was just telling you its origins. Then what's the point? Xiang Shu asked, fed up. Just as he was about to catch up with it, he was interrupted by Chen Xing, so he could only turn once again and continue chasing it as he ran along the wall. That azure Jiao seemed to sense that Xiang Shu would not be an easy opponent, so it kept avoiding their main fighter. Chen Xing observed attentively, and he noticed that the Jiao dragon that Xin Yuanping had turned into could not control its own movements very well as it thrashed about in pain. Wen Zhe rode on its head with one hand, which was seeping resentment, firmly pressed down on that azure Jiao's head, directing its flight path through the city. The Jin troops came and arrayed themselves on the city wall, each of them setting up a strong crossbow that aimed directly for that dancing azure Jiao in midair. Bai Hun, the military official, climbed up to a high spot with drumsticks in his hand, his eyes closely tracking the path the azure Jiao took. Closely after, Xiang Shu let out a whistle. Bai Hun gathered his energy, and he swung one drumstick towards the large drum on the top of the wall, which reverberated with an earth-shaking dong sound. The Jin troops let loose what looked like tens of thousands of arrows at once. Those arrows, each of them having a trailing chain on its end, flew towards the midair azure Jiao. Chen Xing immediately turned all his attention to the scene, lighting up his heart lamp. When Xiang Shu felt the power of the heart lamp, he shouted, "Don't use it. Chen Xing, hurry. I can still keep it up for a little while longer." Xiang Shu gritted his teeth and flicked the long sword in his hand, turning it into a huge bow. With a flash of light, a glowing meteor of an arrow flew towards the head of the Jiao. Upon seeing it, Wen Zhe's expression changed, and the azure Jiao flipped over in midair to avoid a vital blow to its reverse scales. But that arrow passed through the carcass of the Jiao in an instant, flying into the sky beyond. There was a wild, hoarse roar, and the rotting blood in the azure Jiao's body exploded into a poisonous mist in the sky. Soon after, Feng Qianjun jumped onto a rooftop inside the city, sweeping his blade out horizontally. Xiao Shan leapt a few times, jumping onto the flat of the sword, and Feng Qianjun shouted angrily, "Go!" Xiao Shan turned into a swift shadow, flying up towards the Jiao's head, flipping right over Wen Zhe's head with a claw strike from Kangsheng Yuli. In an instant, a broken jiao horn appeared in Wen Zhe's hand, and it stabbed towards Xiao Shan as she angrily shouted, "Even if I die, I must." But just in that moment, the index and middle fingers on Xiang Shu's left and right hands came together, pulling backwards in the returning wind landing geese move, and the light arrow flying away into the distance turned around, returning with a shua, instantly breaking Wen Zhe's arm off with the force of the impact. Wen Zhe let out an anguished cry as Xiao Shan's claw mercilessly dug into her shoulder, tugging her off the azure jiao, and she plummeted towards the earth below. The azure jiao broke free of its bonds of resentment, and with a long cry, it fiercely smashed the homes below it to pieces before flying away, vanishing into the distance. Chen Xing put away his heart lamp, only to feel a rush of pain in his chest like he couldn't breathe properly. Damn, he thought, he had used up all of the mana in the heart lamp when he was purifying the Luohun bell earlier. Don't use it anymore. Xiang Shu shouted upwards. Xiang Shu, Feng Yunjun, and Xiao Shan landed on the main street of the city. Wen Zhe fell down heavily. While struggling to rise, the top half of that long red brocade robe ripped open, revealing a pale, flat chest. Feng Yunjun, male, a male. You're a man. Feng Yunjun didn't expect it at all. The decades-long proprietress of the Dongzhi Bank was actually a man disguised as a woman. Wen Zhe's arm was broken off, but there was no blood coming from the stump. He laughed coldly as he slowly stood up, sneering, "If it wasn't like this, then why, in so many decades, would I not let anyone get close enough to see my body?" Xiang Shu responded angrily, "Enough. I don't care who you are. Exactly how many people have you killed? The common people of the Divine Land had their lives saved by us." Wen Zhe suddenly raised his voice and loudly shouted, "And how did the idiotic commoners reward us? They didn't. Lu Heng, that ungrateful bastard, after he learned that Xin Yuanping was poisoned by the Jiao, he had him sunk to the bottom of the river. I want revenge. I want to dash." Before he could finish his sentence, Wen Zhe's remaining arm turned into a grotesque bony claw as he leapt, shua, towards Xiang Shu, wildly shouting, "Get my revenge on these ungrateful bastards." Feng Yunjun and Xiao Shan were not able to block Wen Zhe in time, and Wen Zhe landed in front of Xiang Shu. But Xiang Shu's speed was faster than Wen Zhe's, and with a swing of his sword, he broke Wen Zhe's ribs. Like a kite on a broken string, Wen Zhe's body flew towards the wall of a house, smashing into it and sending bricks and tiles flying in all directions. With a cold laugh, Wen Zhe climbed out of the rubble. "I also used to be the protector martial god of a great exorcist." Wen Zhe's entire body rapidly recovered, and even the arm that had been broken off by that light arrow gradually grew out again. He said slowly, with the silence of all magic, "You are ultimately limited by the constraints of your flesh and blood, but Shihai has given me the power of the devil god." Xiang Shu didn't wait for Wen Zhe to finish as he sliced across again, saying, "Why don't you attack with it then?" Xiang Shu didn't have the help of the heart lamp, but with only the sword itself, he managed to smash both Wen Zhe and the houses behind him into pieces. Wen Zhe wildly shouted as both his hands turned into bony claws that rushed towards Xiang Shu. But in his rage, Xiang Shu was like a hurricane, and his ferocity gained him an absolute advantage. He was so overpowering that he easily suppressed Wen Zhe's skills while they fought. Wen Zhe was a protector martial god from hundreds of years ago, yet in front of Xiang Shu he had no ability to return those blows. He angrily yelled, "Why are you?" Wen Zhe was finally starting to feel fear, and he disengaged to escape, but just at this moment Feng Yunjun and Xiao Shan flanked him left and right, completely encircling Wen Zhe. Finally, he couldn't bear it anymore and let loose the resentment in his body as he turned and shouted in anger, "Then let's perish together." With those words, Wen Zhe flipped through the air, body covered with pitch-black resentment, and he leapt towards Xiang Shu. But as they exchanged a glance, Xiang Shu pulled out his sword, and Wen Zhe's head was pulverized by Xiang Shu's hit as his body smashed through multiple walls. We can't keep going like this. Feng Yunjun said. This fellow can't be killed. We need Chen Xing to help. Xiang Shu looked towards the platform, where Chen Xing was watching the entire fight. He leaned his entire body on the railings, shakily stretching out a hand, and used the last of his energy to light up the heart lamp. Don't worry about me. Chen Xing cried. Purify him. The sword exploded with a bright light. Xiang Shu's brows furrowed deeply. With a pained, thunderous roar, Wen Zhe pulled himself up again and lifted his hand, his eyes filled with confusion as he turned towards this spectacle. You guys won't have a good ending either, Wen Zhe muttered. Sooner or later, there will be a day where you discover that all you are extinguishing your life for is merely a joke. Go away. Xiang Shu said coldly. The sword fell, and the area exploded with dazzling white light. With a howl, Wen Zhe turned into ash under that blazing light. Chen Xing held on to the railings of that platform, he had no energy left, and he sank into a kneel. Suddenly, the sound of metal boots tromping on wood came from behind. Wu Qi and Zheng Lun whirled around in response. Zheng Lun asked, Chen Darren, are these also your companions? Chen Xing endured the roiling of the blood and qi in his chest as he slowly turned around. He pressed his back up against the railings, and his feet skidded on the floor as he saw the three Drought Fiend Kings, wearing full ensembles of black armor, walk up to the third floor of the official's manor. You guys, quickly, go! A trickle of fresh blood ran out of the corner of Chen Xing's mouth as he mumbled, Xiang Shu, Xiang Shu. The three Drought Fiend Kings simultaneously pulled out their swords, but Wu Qi and Zheng Lun positioned themselves in front of Chen Xing, not willing to escape on their own. Wu Qi angrily rebuked, Evil Yao without honor, the world will not allow for evil to triumph against good. Scram! The moment Wen Zhe turned to ash, Xiang Shu let out a sigh of relief, but as he lifted his head and raised his hand to wave in the direction of the platform, he saw fresh blood spray out from the platform on the third floor of that official's manor, and he froze for a few moments. Chen Xing's back was to the railings, and above him the silhouettes of the Drought Fiend Kings loomed. Chen Xing already could not endure any longer, so he gritted his teeth as he leaned against the railing and tightly closed his eyes. In the next instant, Xiang Shu's loud cry came from far behind, and unknowingly, Chen Xing's meridians began to uncontrollably send power to the heart lamp. That feeling was extremely strange. Before, when Chen Xing was using the heart lamp, he was purposefully doing so, and the heart lamp glowed in response to his intentions. But now, in this moment, hovering on the precipice of life and death, it was as if Xiang Shu forcefully caused him to pull out the light of the heart lamp. That bright light was more intense than any other time he used it before. Soon after, on the long street more than 100 paces away, Xiang Shu slightly arched his body with the Akala blade in hand as he transformed into the war god wearing snow-white and gilded gold martial robes. The Akala blade let out a wang sound as it turned into the faint silhouettes of all 6 magical weapons. With a loud noise, Xiang Shu flew through the air like a golden comet with a brilliant tail, flattening all obstacles as he shot towards the highest point of the official's manor. Chen Xing only felt that his entire body was bathed in a wave of warm brightness, and the passage of time seemed to slow. The Drought Fiend Kings pulled out their swords, but they slowed as they moved to cut him down, until their motions came to a stop. With light as bright as that of the sun, Xiang Shu rushed up to that platform, his 6 magical weapons appearing all at once to bombard the 3 Drought Fiend Kings. Sima Yi's helmet was flung off, Sima Yang blocked desperately, and Sima Ying's armor-clad arm broke. Chen Xing opened his eyes wide, and in his eyes was reflected the golden glowing silhouette of Xiang Shu's back. It was exactly the same as the day when they had fought Feng Tian Ye in the light-bearing hall. The power of the protector martial god seemed to be activated under certain mysterious conditions, which Chen Xing didn't have the time to think about in detail as Xiang Shu stepped onto the platform, putting himself in front of Chen Xing. Lifting his hand, he summoned his weapons, and the 6 magical weapons that came from the Akala blade circled around his body in a slow spin. I've had enough of you all, Xiang Shu said coldly. The Drought Fiend Kings realized that the man before them was definitely not an enemy they could defeat, so they all turned into black flames, flying off to flee, but Xiang Shu angrily shouted, "Cowards! You still want to escape?" Closely following that, the weapons melded together into a golden ring, which flew out with a wing, blocking the escape route of the black flames. Xiang Shu then pulled his hands back, and the golden light dispersed as the weapon returned into his hands, once again turning into the huge bow, and a single arrow made of light pierced the 3 balls of black flame. The black flames once again turned into the Drought Fiend Kings, plummeting to the ground, and the bow in Xiang Shu's hand became a sword, sweeping in an arc towards them. The golden flame burst, swallowing the 3 Drought Fiend Kings in an instant and pulverizing half the official's manor as it turned into a hurricane that exploded outwards. The golden light collected on Xiang Shu's body before disappearing. Ah, great! Chen Xing! Chen Xing! Xinger! Xinger dash! Darkness swam in front of Chen Xing's eyes, and he knew no more. Early morning, Chang'an, as the officials entered the court. Wang Zi walked at the very front of all the officials, smiling calmly and making small talk, and he turned his head to the side to glance at Mirongchang who had recently returned to court. He smiled at Mirongchang and nodded his head. Mirongchang's face stayed cold and sour, clearly not wanting to greet Wang Zi in return. Suddenly, Wang Zi stopped in his tracks, his smile freezing on his face as he turned to look towards the south. "Wang Daren?" a civil official asked from behind. Wang Zi's face was sheet white, and a dazed look appeared in his eyes. Mirongchang walked at the head of the military officials, and he glanced curiously at Wang Zi before making a please gesture, indicating that he should go first. Wang Zi suddenly seemed worried, and as he lifted his foot to mount the steps to the hall, he actually slipped and tripped on the stair. "Wang Daren! Wang Daren, be careful!" Wang Zi wiped off his sweat and barely managed to nod in response. It was daytime, and inside the Qin imperial court the discussion continued about the proposal to start a southern campaign. As he sat on the throne, Fu Jian was close to nodding off, but the members of the court suddenly noticed something. The idea of the southern campaign was spearheaded by none other than Wang Zi, but why was his mind seemingly elsewhere today? Not only Wang Zi, but recently, even Fu Jian's expressions hadn't looked right. Mirongchang, however, was against the southern campaign, and it was exactly for this matter that he hurried back from Luoyang to Chang'an. That day, various officials brought up several reasons to not embark on the southern campaign, and Fu Jian didn't get irritated but rather just waved his hand, saying, "I understand. This court session is over." This official has an observation. Mirongchang didn't let Fu Jian dismiss the court and said, "Would His Majesty like to listen?" Wang Zi finally realized that he had an opponent, and he lifted his head up from this mess of a court to meet Mirongchang's gaze. Fu Jian casually said, "If you want to say it, then we will want to listen." But Mirongchang replied, "I will only say it if your Majesty is willing to listen." One of Fu Jian's rare smiles appeared, turning the atmosphere of the court a little friendlier. "Do tell," Fu Jian finally said. Mirongchang said, "Your Majesty has worked hard in recent days, and I imagine that many of us have witnessed this. Since they have proposed this southern campaign to wipe out the Jin, then they must have considered this carefully. In return, they have been indecisive on their decision and should receive their just due in the future." Mirongchang's voice carried clearly through the quiet hall. Before returning to Chang'an, this official believed that your Majesty had already made up your mind, but today, it seems like there is still some distance to go before a consensus. What these honored officials have discussed, whether the troops should be dispatched, I imagine that your Majesty has long since decided. No, Fu Jian waved his hand, finally letting his gaze sweep properly over the gathered officials before it darted back to Mirongchang, and at last his gaze landed on Wang Zi's face. "We have been hesitating, not over the issue of sending out the troops. It is imperative that the southern campaign reclaim our lost territory, and there is nothing to hesitate about here. We are mulling over if there is a different method to gather an army for the southern campaign. Murongchang raised an eyebrow and asked, what method? Fu Jian said, the opportunity is not yet ripe. When the time is right, Wang Zi will naturally inform everyone. Court is dismissed. Chang'er, in a bit you should come to the palace to see Yan'er, he was almost like a true little brother to your sister when she was alive. Murongchang's forehead wrinkled. The gloomy underground, in the Huanmo Palace. What you're protecting, that voice said coldly, will always betray you one day. Today, your own hands are just digging your own grave. Chen Xing once again saw the scene in the Huanmo Palace, of the giant heart hanging in the middle of the underground palace, its arteries and veins extending into the earth vein all around it, sucking out energy. Suddenly, Chen Xing woke up, panting desperately in a sunlit room. Xiang Shu, who had been watching over him from the side, immediately lifted his head and took a look at Chen Xing. Chen Xing mutely stared back at him before lowering his head to look at first his body, then at his surroundings. He didn't know when, but he had been changed into a simple inner robe, and someone had tucked him under a blanket. The room was filled with the smell of medicine, and there was a small stove next to the bed, in which some medicinal herbs were bubbling away. Where is this? Chen Xing asked weakly. How long have I been asleep? It was really comfortable. Xiang Shu stared stunned at Chen Xing, before turning around a moment later and sweeping out of the room. He's awake. Xiang Shu's voice was actually trembling a little. He woke up. Closely after, Xiao Shan rushed in first, and with a loud shout, he pounced onto Chen Xing. Chen Xing, Xiao Shan. Xie Dayun and Gu Qing also briskly came over, and Gu Qing said, I'll go tell Feng Dage. Xie Dayun sat down to check Chen Xing's pulse, and Chen Xing said, I feel like when I used the heart lamp, I may have overused it a little and damaged my meridians. I've slept for quite a few days, hey. Everyone in the room watched Chen Xing without speaking. Xiang Shu looked at him for a bit before he turned his head and paced a bit in the room, before looking again towards Chen Xing. His lips kept trembling, and the corners of his eyes were a little red. All right, Xie Dayun said. As long as you're awake then there's no problem. You should rest a little first. Chen Xing gently touched his stomach and responded, I'm a little hungry. Xie Dayun glanced at Xiang Shu, saying, not mine to deal with anymore, it's your turn. Xiao Shan hurried to go find some rations, and he handed them over to Chen Xing, who complained, can't you let the patient eat something easier to swallow down? Xiang Shu? What's wrong? Xiang Shu let out a breath, a little overwhelmed. He smiled weakly and said, awake, as long as you're awake, that's good, thank the heavens and the earth. How long have I slept? Chen Xing only felt that his head hurt. 3 months, Xiao Shan said. Chen Xing. End chapter.